Well, thanks so much for joining us today for um, this quick bite. We are going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, generative AI. I know that you're all just like so excited to spend more time talking about it. I'm Brier Anderson. I'm STLI Senior Instructional Designer, and I feel like I've been doing a lot of AI work for the last semester, and it is sometimes my favorite, but a lot of times not. But it is our reality right now. And so we're going to spend some time today just talking about how to begin conversations about generative AI with your learners, whatever your context is. This is an evolving and rapidly changing space that is affecting your, teaching and learning. And my hope today is that you'll leave with some practical strategies for how to have conversations with your learners. So I'm going to be working today from, this is a guide, and Pablo's going to drop it in the chat, but I'm going to have some stuff on the slides. This is our guide from STLI that provides concrete strategies for engaging in discussion about generative AI with your learners. And so here's a link and a QR code. It's a Canva doc. It's a couple pages long, but again, I'm gonna talk about it, and Pablo's going to pop that link in the chat for everybody. So why discuss generative AI with your learners? Why do you even need to talk about it? Um, you know, I feel like there are some misconceptions that we're hearing around campus and that we're seeing in the survey data and in the research that students know a lot about it, and that they're more knowledgeable than their instructors. And in some mechanisms that's the case, and in other ways it's not. But even if you're not an expert on generative AI or you're not comfortable with generative AI, your students are using generative AI. So, regardless of personal perspectives and expertise, they are counting on you to provide some clear guidance on how to navigate its use or non use in your classes. And hiding from this topic, as much as many of us would like to, isn't making it go away. It just seems to be getting more ubiquitous day by day. So, don't assume that they aren't using it, because they are. That's one reason to talk about it with your learners. And in this instance, ambiguity really is your enemy. Students want to know how, when, if, and under what conditions they can or cannot use generative AI. And so even if your syllabus has a blanket statement like no AI, are you saying no to Grammarly, which is a type of AI? Or the Microsoft embedded outputs? Or are you saying no use of generative AI like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot? So specificity here really is the key. And we have again seen this desire for transparency from students. So last week's town hall, students were expressing this desire. We've seen this in the research. We're hearing it anecdotally from our student partners and from instructors across campus. Another reason is that to talk about generative AI with your learners is really this supporting academic integrity. So having these specifications that using generative AI outside of whatever your policy is, it's an honor code violation. And so the clearer that you are with your students about your policy and that it is an honor code violation, if they are using it outside the constraints of your policy, the more likely they are to understand the gravity of the situation and again adhere to and support academic integrity in your courses. Another reason to talk about generative AI with your learners is that they don't know how generative AI works. Many of our students are coming in with some experience using generative AI on their own, but there's no instruction that's taking place on how it works and on why its output might need to be evaluated. And so even though they're using it, like a lot of us, they don't really know how it works. They don't know what's going into the training data. They don't even know maybe what training data is. So having those conversations to teach students about how generative AI works can be informative to supporting academic integrity and learning, because we want them, if they're using it in your course because you've approved it, to evaluate its output and to think critically. And then students also want to talk about generative AI. They want to talk about some of these larger ethical concerns like privacy, like intellectual property, bias, misinformation, um, the environmental impact, and how this tool is changing and has changed their professional lives to come and the workforce and their college experience. Okay, so we know we need to talk about with generative AI with our learners, regardless of context. But how do we even start? Like it's such a big topic, and for many of us, it's such a loaded topic. Many instructors feel very strongly kind of on either end of the spectrum. And so here at STLI, we want you to consider your perspective and experience and use your context and goals to determine how much you engage in this discussion. And I'm going to propose three kind of levels for thinking about talking about generative AI to your students. Um, so entry, intermediate, and advanced. And let me tell you what I mean by these. If you're someone who doesn't use or have a great deal of experience with generative AI, or you're thinking about your context or your learning goals, and you want to support learning and academic integrity, but you really just want to move forward with teaching your class, right, or having your learning experience, then this like entry level may be the right point for you. If you're someone with more experience with generative AI, or you have some assignments that dabble in using generative AI in your courses, then intermediate might be the right space for you. Last, if you're someone who's using or planning to use generative AI with your learners kind of throughout your course, and you want to teach your learners some of these critical literacies of generative AI, then this advanced level might be the right fit for you. So take kind of these three entry points into consideration today, and we'll talk about what this actually looks like in kind of the concrete um, mode. So entry level. All right. So if you do nothing else, regardless of your perspectives on generative AI, regardless of your feelings about it, or it's, even if you're outright saying none, nope, nothing in my class, these are a couple of things that will create transparency and clarity for your students and support academic integrity and learning. So first is to define your policy. What's your policy? Be very specific and discuss your expectations for how generative AI will or will not be used with students. Document that policy in your syllabus. Even consider identifying on specific assignments and assessments. Go a step further. Make sure that you're talking about whatever your policy is. So specificity, like a clear policy in your syllabus on assignments. And it's not too late, right? Let's say, we know that it's February and you've already started your courses, but it's not too late to pop this onto your next paper or exam, or to have a conversation with your class right now and say, hey, we didn't address this at the beginning of the semester, but I want to make sure that I'm addressing it right now. So don't think that like this is something you have to wait to do over the summer or next fall when you're teaching again. We would encourage you to go ahead and have this conversation right now. Define the policy for them, write it down somewhere and give it to them. Talk about it. Give a rationale for why. So explain to students why they can't use generative AI in your course, or why they can only use it in a specific manner to garner some buy-in from them. Students are more likely to follow your policy if they understand why. And my favorite analogy with this is about push-ups. So if you want students, you're teaching a call 150, and you're teaching students kind of foundational writing skills, well, you don't want generative AI to be like doing the writing for them because you're trying to teach them the writing skills. So who's doing the push-ups? And, feel free to, I stole that from somebody. Feel free to take that idea, but talking to them about like, hey, my goal is to teach you this skill, and like push-ups build muscles, I'm trying to build these muscles in you. So that's why we're not going to use it in this context. And then support students or learners' understanding of how generative AI works. Again, many students don't know why an output should be evaluated. This is that black box problem that maybe you've kind of heard referred to in the background. So explaining to them, just some of the basics of like, hey, there are inaccuracies, there are hallucinations, there are biases in, the data that these models are trained on, can help them to think more critically about its output. so that students would know maybe, oh, I should probably take a look at this thing before submitting it, or I should consider why I'm using the tool before using it. So these are the entry points. This is the like, if you do nothing else, try these couple of things with your students. Okay, intermediate. Let's say that you're going a little further. This would be the moment to talk with your students about some of generative AI's benefits and limitations. And here we really encourage you to think as a disciplinary expert because this is going to look different in different fields. So if you're a computer scientist, it's going to look different than history. So one thing to do is reflect on with your students on generative AI's benefits and limitations. You are your content's expert. So showing them, hey, these are things that it's really good at in our field, and these are things that it's not very good at. I had a student partner last semester who I asked her to APA cite a couple of things, and she went to ChatGPT, and the citations were a hot mess. So, that was an opportunity for a conversation with her about like, hey, just a heads up, like this tool is not great at this thing. And I know that because I know what APA citations are supposed to look like, and also these are all made up. So a good teaching moment there. And she was a senior and like a really smart student. So, again, they don't know a lot about this. So you, as the disciplinary expert, have the opportunity to reflect with them and show them. So this reflection can also work before you have an assignment that incorporates generative AI or after an assignment that incorporates generative AI. So lots of reflection. Model responsible use. Show students or learners what it looks like to evaluate output. Do it together as a class. What tasks, again, might it be good at? What are its limitations? Um, how does the output compare to something that they might do themselves? Model this responsible use for them and discuss any shortcomings or opportunities to deepen learning. I've heard some of our William & Mary students anecdotally talk about how sometimes the output is like a C. Like depending on the class or the project, they'll get something and they're like, it was okay. But like, how could they deepen the learning from there? Discuss any ethical concerns with students. So this might look like talking about academic integrity, where you have students define what original work is or responsible research. This might be you sharing professional examples of academic integrity statements from your journals within your field, where they're asking you to be transparent about your AI use. You might talk about the digital divide where there's a paywall divide. Our students are very concerned about equity. And so, this paywall divide could create some real barriers for students who can afford to use the more expensive tools or can't afford to use them. You might talk about environmental concerns, but these are aspects of generative AI many students are unaware of, but a lot of our students care very deeply about. And then again, educate students about how the models are trained and explain this impact on privacy and intellectual property. So this is the opportunity for you to tell your 400 level students to not submit their original research into the models because we don't know if they're being trained on the data that they're receiving. And, if your dissertation or your capstone is unpublished and you're asking one of these tools to examine it, like, is it taking it? What is copyright? What is intellectual property? So these are important conversations. And again, our students do not know this. I know that Pablo has worked with many of the graduate students at VIMS, and he can, if you have questions about that, can share after the call. But he was speaking to a graduate class, and they just like had no idea that this was even a possible prospect. So this is kind of a couple of suggestions that we have for that intermediate level. Okay, let's say you want to take it a step further and you're planning on regularly using generative AI in your course, or your context lends itself to discussing generative AI, consider collaborating to co-construct expectations. And that might look like you taking a survey at the beginning of your class to evaluate learner knowledge. This might be if you teach a large section of something, an anonymous poll and poll everywhere. Or if you're doing a training, poll EV like I used at the beginning is a great way to get some anonymized data to allow you to make some real world decisions. It might be some survey questions in Blackboard before. That's something I've seen some instructors doing on campus before the beginning of the class. Or again, it's not too late in the middle of the course. Your mid-semester point after the midterm is a good opportunity to evaluate your learners. This might be a discussion if you have a small seminar class. Question that you can ask students some tailored questions like, do you use generative AI? Are there specific generative AI tools that you think should or shouldn't be used in this assignment? How effective do you think it is? What skills do you feel like you need to have to be prepared for your future field? Or it might be a Likert scale where you're giving students some prompts and you're asking them to tell you if something is okay or not okay. So is it okay to use generative AI for brainstorming? Is it okay to use it for, writing a first draft, for editing as a thought partner, and having the students co-construct these expectations with you by evaluating learner knowledge first. And then you also might create some generative AI learning objectives. So what specific critical literacies do you want to teach your students regarding these tools? Do you want to teach them to evaluate the output? Do you want to teach them how the models work? Do you want to teach them to make ethical and informed and responsible decisions when choosing to use or not to use the tools? Do you want to teach them how to use a specific tool that's relevant to your field? Again, all of this to then kind of co-construct some expectations for how generative AI is or isn't to be used in your course. And last, examine some of the policies, so the privacy policies or the terms of service. Take a look at these with students because they might be surprised to see how the bias is addressed or the accuracy of output or what these tools are saying about themselves. This is a good opportunity to kind of dig deep into that language that we all just click, yep, I read it, I understand, and to really see what the models and the tools are saying about themselves. And ask them to define for you what ethical and responsible use looks like. So again, this is the resource that I'm working from, and we'll send this out to you in the email follow-up. So this is our generative AI communication entry points. We want you to feel comfortable regardless of your perspectives about generative AI and your context to be able to have some of these important conversations with your students.